housekeeping. So this webinar is being recorded. It will be in the follow-up package for everyone who registered. So if you're here, if you have to leave, if you couldn't make it and you're watching this later, obviously you'll have it to check out after the fact. If you can stay muted while Shannon is presenting, I know that she will have some time to open it up both during and after for Q&A. If you want to put a question in, if it's on the top of your head, you can type it in the chat and we will go through those as well as kind of the verbal questions when we have those Q&A times. Also, something we usually like to do is just have you introduce yourself, your name, your role, your department, and or where you're coming from across North America. We have people from all the corners of this continent, which is really exciting. So if you want to introduce yourself there to everyone, gives us a good sense of where this is going out to. As I mentioned, there will be a follow-up package with some information. As well, we're going to give Shannon, the whole hour. She's going to take us through her presentation. But at the end, as was mentioned in the pre-webinar email from Kate, we are going to show you just a quick demo, not of the whole Peer Connect system, but we do have a new feature that allows you to do batch recommendations for peer support or support check-ins. So after we're done, if you're able to stay on, whether that's past the hour or just coming up to it, we'll show you a little teaser of that some of our client groups are already using and some will have access to soon. So if you are a client using Peer Connect and you want to see that, check it out. If you're not a client yet and you want to know more about it, stay tuned. As well, we will put some links in both the follow-up package and in the chat of if you want to book a longer demo and discussion with our team to check out the Peer Connect system. So I think that is it in terms of the housekeeping. Shannon, if you're ready, I will give you a quick introduction and leave it in your capable hands. So
Absolutely.
Shannon Mead is deeply invested in the impact of compassion fatigue and secondary trauma and focuses most of her research on these topics. As a foster and adoptive parent, she's felt the impact herself, but has also seen it in the lives of her guardian friends and family. She says, "My humor is dark, my wardrobe is jeans and t-shirts, and my favorite place is outdoors." So we are super excited and grateful to have Shannon with us today. And yeah, you can take it away, Shannon.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. Thank you for sharing a bit of your day with me. I always really appreciate that. Thanks, Nick. Like you said, so I am a marriage and family therapist and a certified coach, and I practice out of Reno, Nevada. My company is called Stack of Stones, and we're all about guardian wellness. So you're going to hear me use that word guardian throughout the training today. That's just my wraparound word that I use to discuss anyone who works as a first responder, in healthcare, in death care, or in social services. To keep from saying all those words over and over again, I use guardian as an umbrella phrase. And I am all about helping you with the strain of that work. So guardian roles have some very specific sources of stress, and I'm all about doing anything I can to help you manage those. I'm also pretty chill. So if you have questions, like Nick said, if you have questions, throw them in the chat. And I will stop every now and then to see if there's any questions, and I have some time at the end. Today, specifically, what we're going to talk about is resilience routines. So let me get some slides going for you. Always the scariest part of any presentation. Okay, Nick, can you just give me a thumbs up if those are working? Okay. Awesome. So today we're going to talk about resilience routines. So theoretically, I'm a big fan of the concept of self-care, right? Self-care makes sense. I'm a big fan. Except when you work as a guardian, sometimes a lot of the material out there is too light and fluffy. Guardian work is super hard on our mental health. In order to keep ourselves healthy and well, we need something stronger. So I use the phrase resilience routines. And today I'm going to help you understand what that actually means. I know that we all know we're supposed to take good care of ourselves, but figuring out what that is for us as an individual can be super tricky. So I'm going to give you some things to think about. I cannot tell you what you need, right? At this point, you're a bunch of boxes on a screen, so I can't tell you what you need to do. But what I'm going to do is give you some different categories so you can learn to assess what you need as an individual, because we're all totally different. We're all going to have different resilience routines. Okay. So to dive in, let me first talk about the things I'm not gonna talk about. So there's a couple things in the sake of a 60-minute training that I just won't have time, but I want them on your mind. And the first is the stressors you carry as a guardian. So if you work as a guardian, it's really important to me, kind of like Nick said in the intro, it's really important to me that you understand compassion fatigue, moral injury, grief, trauma, including secondary or vicarious trauma. Those vocabulary words or those concepts are something that I really want you to know and understand because in order to take care of ourselves, we have to understand what we're dealing with. When I do the longer version of this training, I start with that. For the sake of today, I'm going to skip it because on the Peer Connect resource library, I have free trainings on all of these. So if these four concepts on here are not something you're super familiar with, no problem. The resource library has trainings both in video and written format. At some point after this, just make sure you go check them out because I really want you to understand some of the stress of what you're dealing with. And I know that we have a lot of people in here that serve in a role which is helping others. So maybe you're a peer support coordinator, maybe you're wellness, maybe you're chaplain. Having these available can sometimes be helpful. So part of my goal is to help you as an individual, but also when you're in the middle of a hard conversation, you need a resource. This is something that you can reach to if you need to help someone understand something like moral injury. Okay. The other thing that is important for you to know, but we're not going to talk about today, any good resilience routine has to address the basics. And what I mean by basics is we have to drink enough water, wah, wah, right? We have to get proper nutrition, we have to get enough sleep, exercise, we have to go to the doctor, get our labs, all that stuff. Everything I'm going to talk about in this training in terms of your resilience routine needs to build on top of basics. But you don't need me to break these all down. There's plenty of other resources. I just want you to kind of keep in mind the stuff we talk about next doesn't matter if you haven't had any water to drink in between your coffee. Okay. Okay, that's what we're not going to talk about. Let's move into what we're going to talk about. And one of the places I like to start is in order to have a strong resilience routine, we have to have the proper goal. And unfortunately, the goal of our resilience routine is not happiness. Okay, we are not building a routine that's going to help you be happy. Sorry. I know that can feel disappointing, but stick with me. So there's a couple different reasons we don't aim for happiness. One is happiness is a human emotion, just like all the other ones, right? So fear, sadness, anger, we expect those to come and go. Happiness comes and goes too. So if we're chasing it, if we're trying to catch it and create it, it's like chasing the wind. So that's why we don't want it as a goal. And then secondarily, one of the things I find is if we know we're not doing great and we know we need to do something to take care of ourselves, so we do it, right? We go do the thing, we get the pedicure or whatever. And it doesn't make us feel better, we don't feel happy, then we feel like it didn't work and we don't continue trying. So that's why happiness it's an elusive goal and it's not what we want to aim for. Instead, what I want you to aim for is connection. Okay. So I want you to be connected in three different areas. The first one is your sense of self. Who are you? This work can really kind of dissolve our sense of who we are. When we are the type of person that likes to serve others and take care of others, we can lose ourselves in the midst of that. And this can get even worse if we're doing things like parenting, right? Or volunteer work. Or I know, like, for those of you who are doing something like chaplain or peer support, you're doing it on top of your job. And in so many different areas, you're taking care of the needs of others, we lose ourselves in the midst of it. So a good resilience routine is going to either keep you connected to that sense of self or potentially help you rebuild it. Okay, so I have quite a few clients who come in. I'm in my office today. They come in and they sit down, and one of the things I'll ask them when they're really fried and burnt out is, what do you like to do? What's fun for you? And I get a fair number of blank stares because for a lot of us, we lose that. Okay, so if I said that and you're like, guilty, okay, that's okay. We can rebuild it. But in order to keep you healthy and well, that sense of self is really critical. Okay, and sense of self, what that means is what do you like? What's fun for you? What are your values? What brings you alive? All those different things. I'll keep talking about it. Okay. In addition to your sense of self, I also need you connected to others. So the work can really mess with our relationships, right? And this might be our romantic relationships, our friends and family, our kids, our colleagues. The work, and especially when we're just tired and burnt out and grumpy, the work can really get in the way of our connection to the people around us. But in order to stay healthy and well, we have to be connected to the people we love. So your resilience routine is going to continue to protect and rebuild that. And then finally, it is going to keep you connected to your big picture. So big picture is the wraparound phrase that I use for anything. It's going to be individual to you, and this could be anything like your spiritual or your religious beliefs. This could be your connection to nature, right? Your connection to your community, your cultural background. Again, I can't tell you what your big picture is, but for you as an individual, remaining connected to that bigger picture is critical. And this includes connection to your sense of community. So for a lot of us, we get into the work because we want to serve our community, and then we serve our community and we don't want anything to do with them. Right? That can really start to wear us down. So part of what we may need in your resilience routine is keeping you connected to community, but not in a way where you're connected to the worst parts of community. Okay. Any questions pop up on that, on the goal? No? Good. Okay. So it's not all bad news because if we are connected, if we're focusing on that connection, we do end up with more opportunities for happiness. And this may look like joy, contentment, again, that sense of just being around people that bring you a sense of who you are. And the way I want you to think about it is if anyone else is a gardener like me, an attempted gardener, you know that if you're planting something like tomatoes, you don't focus on the fruit, right? Do we want fruit? Yes. But what we focus on is the soil, right? And the water and the sunlight, making sure that plant has everything it needs to thrive. When we do that, what we get is fruit. Same thing with your resilience routine. If we focus on connection, we end up getting the fruit. Okay. Oops. Okay. So if that's the goal, how do we get there, right? I'm guessing we've got a bunch of fixers on here and you want to know, how do we fix it? Okay. One of the things I want you to keep in mind is when I talk about a resilience routine, I mean routine. This isn't a one-time thing. This is something that we're going to wrap into your life. Some elements of it will be daily, some would be weekly, monthly, quarterly, and annually. Okay. I'm going to wrap back around to this, but as I describe the next pieces, I want you to start thinking, what does this need to look like in my life on an ongoing basis within these different time frames? Okay. I'll come back to this. So specifically, I'm going to give you four categories today. And when we, again, like I said in the beginning, when we talk about a resilience routine, I can't tell you what you need. And you at this point may honestly not even know what you need, but this is four different ways to think about what needs to be in that routine. Okay. And you're going to see as we go through, some of them kind of overlap, but it's essentially three or four different perspectives to look at. The first one is going to take us back to high school geometry. Sorry, bet you didn't think we were going there. Only briefly, though, because I am a therapist and we don't do math. Right? I want you to go back to geometry and think about congruence. If you remember, congruent angles back in geometry means two angles that are the same. They're two angles that fit together. What this means for you today from a mental health standpoint is we need to take some time to think about what is congruent for you as an individual. Okay, what is congruent and then therefore what is incongruent, what fits and what doesn't. And I want you to look at this in three different areas. So from a professional standpoint, what is a good fit within your work? What is right for you? Okay, so I am a therapist who specializes in first responders, some of which are very grumpy, right? And I'm often doing the really deep, dark trauma work. That is congruent for me. It doesn't necessarily mean I like it, right? It's not like, oh, this is horrible, hooray, but it fits. It's part of who I am as an individual. What in your job is congruent for you? What fits, right? If we go back to that sense of self, what is the right spot for you? And then vice versa, what is incongruent? Okay, we are all responsible adults, which means that we have incongruent parts of our lives. So part of your resilience routine is going to be aware of it, and then we'll talk about what we do next. So I know a bunch of you are from Canada, but those of us here in the US are getting ready for taxes, right? So as a small business owner, my accountant is requesting the records of my books. That is incongruent for me. I have them, my records are fine, everything's there, but gathering them and doing the financial piece of my business is incongruent. Okay. You may not know what is congruent and incongruent for you. So when I have clients come in who have really kind of lost that sense of self, this is one of the places we start. And I'll do things like have them maybe put a notebook in their car or take a note on their phone where after every shift, they just kind of stop and assess what was congruent about this and what wasn't. Because sometimes it is big things and sometimes it's little, right? So things that are incongruent sometimes are just really subtle. And you may need to figure it out. If you don't know, that's okay, but you do need to practice figuring it out. I also like to point out that when it comes to congruence, this can change. Okay, so the things that used to be super congruent for me as a 22-year-old are far less congruent as a 43-year-old, right? Now I've got a mortgage and bad knees, and I need to pay attention to how I sleep. Okay, we change. Our roles may also change. So if you have promoted, there's a very good chance the parts of your job that are congruent and incongruent are different, right? When we promote, we're doing things like more paperwork, meetings, personnel issues, stuff like that. Okay. So if you used to know, but now you're not sure, okay, that's just being a human. Okay. Next category. Oops, sorry, I skipped those. I always forget the little people boxes are over my screen, so I don't see. In addition to our professional congruence and incongruence, we also want to look at personally what is congruent and incongruent from a personal standpoint, because this is reality, right? So within your personal life, we are not going to be able to eliminate everything that is incongruent for you, but we can pay attention and we can try to maximize what is congruent. Okay, so an example I use for this, a lot of the things that are congruent and incongruent are super neutral. We're not going to judge whether, right? The fact that I don't like to prep my books for my accountant, that's neutral. It doesn't make me a bad person. It's just part of who I am. The example I have for incongruent personally is my husband is an awesome person. We've been married for a long time, but he is a morning whistler. And he gets up and he's perky and he just goes about his business and he's singing and whistling. And based on that, you can guess what type of morning person I am. Not a whistler. I'm a slow waker, right? I need my coffee, I need my time. So if he and I are both working from home and he's just busy, 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 it is incongruent for me. That doesn't make him a bad person, doesn't make me a bad person. It just is. So when you're assessing your personal life, one of the things you look at is where are there incongruencies? And that's okay, but we need to consider them in your plan. Okay. And then finally, this is my point where I give you the permission essentially to acknowledge that some people are incongruent. Okay, some people just don't fit with us. Again, it's neutral. It doesn't make them a bad person. But if you spend a whole shift working alongside someone who's incongruent, we have to notice that, and then we're going to work your resilience routine to kind of counterbalance that incongruence. Okay. Don't make a note of this and put it on the fridge, right? This isn't the kind of thing we're calling out people as incongruent, but I do want to give you permission to recognize it because when it comes to taking care of you, we have to know. Okay. Any questions on congruence? What are we doing over there? Good?
Could
Okay.
could there be a person that you're congruent for, but they're congruent for you?
Ah, yes. Okay, so just to reiterate, it broke up on my side, so I'll just say it for everybody. Could there be someone that is incongruent to you, but you are congruent for them? Yeah. And depending on that relationship, right? Sometimes this is like a colleague relationship and it's not that complicated. Sometimes this is a closer friend or family member, and that may be something you have to kind of consider how you are both caring and kind to them, but protecting your own boundaries in it. Yeah, good question. Anything else? Okay, we're gonna keep building on this. So if you're like this still feels foggy, that's okay. We're gonna keep building on it. Our next category is vert needs. And what I mean by vert needs is introvert or extrovert. Okay, so when it comes to our resilience routines, we have to know what we need. And contrary to popular belief, introverts don't hate people. We are just revitalized or re-energized by time alone. So introverts need time by themselves, extroverts need time by with other people in order to re-energize. An introvert and an extrovert can both go to the same party, both have fun and enjoy being there, but at the end, the introvert will be tired and they'll want to go home and be alone. The extrovert may want to go do something else with friends. Okay. Neither is bad. And most of us are a mix, right? This isn't super black and white. We're generally a mix. Neither is bad, but one of the things for your routine that I need you to start thinking about is how do you recharge? And based on your current life, how much time do you get in that space? Okay, so if you are introverted and you are never alone, you're either at work surrounded by people or at home surrounded by people, that's going to wear on you. And the reality is, it may be hard to get time alone, but it becomes super essential for our central nervous system and our sense of well-being. Okay. Same thing, if you're extroverted, you may be surrounded by people all the time, but they may not be the right people. Okay, so going back to congruence, you may be at work surrounded by people who are fine, but they're not your people. Okay, so part of your resilience routine may be making sure you are getting time in those environments that are refueling for you. Okay, I'll keep talking about this. We're going to keep layering them on. Tied to our vert needs is our sensory needs. Okay, and so what I mean by sensory needs is five senses, right? Sight, touch, smell, taste, hearing. We all have various levels of input that we need. Some of us are super high sensory. We do well when there's a lot of high sensory input coming. Some of us are low sensory. We do not do well with it and we crave like more quiet, calm. Again, totally neutral. Neither is good or bad. And just like vert, we're often a mix. But what we have to start doing is paying attention. If we are a high sensory person and we're not getting hits of high sensory input, we start to tweak. If we are a low sensory person and we have too much input around us, we start to tweak. Okay. So I'll explain this one a little bit more because it's not as familiar. So I first learned about sensory inputs. Nick mentioned we were foster adoptive parents. So my son moved in, he was about 8. And when we would put him to bed and we'd walk down the hallway, he would bounce back and forth between the walls. And he wasn't throwing a fit. There was nothing weird about it other than that's just kind of how he moved through the world, right? He bounced off the walls or he flopped on the floor. He was just very, now I know, high sensory. There was no training for it at this point. Sorry, that's my dog's in the room with me scratching. There's no training for it at that point. So I was just figuring it out. But what I learned is that in order for him to be healthy and well, he needs a lot of high input. Okay, so in that scenario, I started figuring out as a kid, if he was really upset and needed help calming down, I would pat him hard, right? If he needed to listen and he was too upset and he couldn't, adding a secondary sensory input would actually really help him. Then when I went back to grad school, which is after this point, then I started learning about how important it is to all of us. So for someone high sensory, if you are high sensory, you need those inputs. So for him, he did much better when he was playing high school football, right? Crashing into other people is a good thing for him. If you are high sensory, there's a good chance you are drawn towards things like it could be extreme sports. This could be like loud environments, like a concert or a sporting event, anything where there's crowds and announcers and lasers, right? The kind of thing that makes me tweak. If you crave those things, there's a good chance you're a high sensory person. On the flip side, if those things drain your battery, there's a chance you're low sensory. Again, just like introvert, you may have fun. So I'm super low sensory. I can enjoy a concert. A concert is fun, but I'm tired. And afterwards, I need to go somewhere quiet. I could never do like a festival where you just go to concerts one after another. That wouldn't work for my central nervous system. For some of you, though, that is your favorite place because that ongoing input is actually very calming to you. Okay. So I'll keep talking about what you do with this, but again, I want you to just be curious. I want you to start paying attention. What am I drawn to? What do I crave? When am I exhausted? For some of you, if you're high sensory and then you get put on like light duty or something like that, you feel like you're losing your mind and you're crazy. And part of it is because you're at a desk and you're a high sensory person who is now getting zero sensory input. Okay. We'll keep talking about this. Okay. And then my fourth category is play. So there's a lot of research at this point that play is essential to healthy human function. And I'm not talking kids, I'm talking about adults. Okay. And play is the thing that gets squeezed out of our lives. So when we are responsible, right? And especially when those responsibilities increase, maybe we've got kids, maybe we're coaching Little League, whatever it is, there's not a lot of time for our own personal play. And that's where we really start to lose that sense of self, connection to ourselves, and that connection to others. So let me give you some categories of play. Okay, when I say that word, the first one that probably comes to mind is sports, right? Playing sports. And this could be play for you. Again, you see how they start to layer on. So if you are drawn towards sports and you like something like pick up basketball, that might mean you're high sensory and you like the impact of that game and the extroverted activity of playing with your friends. Okay. This could also, though, be solo sports. So if you like to run, if one of your favorite things to do is to go for a long run by yourself, that counts and that qualifies. It's just a different way of play. Okay. Another one is games. right? So playing games, and this could be like, I love to play card games or board games. This could be something like stupid games on your phone. Okay, this could be video games, right? All of those are a form of play. Again, with everything in our resilience routine, we want to pay attention. We don't just want to play video games for 7 hours on end and ignore everything else around us. But that sense of play may be something that we do need a dose of. Okay. Creativity. So creativity includes a whole bunch of stuff. This could be everything from like woodworking to working on old cars. This could be gardening, cooking, baking, painting, music, whatever it is. Anything where you are creating something that counts as play. With the caveat on things like gardening or cooking, it needs to be something you're enjoying. So if you're just making spaghetti to feed the kids before you go to Little League, that's not play. But making a meal that you really enjoy, something that you spend time with, maybe you turn on music, pour a glass of wine, that's play. Okay. Same thing. If you're gardening because you have to pull the weeds because your yard looks horrible, doesn't count. Okay. Gardening is something you're doing out of enjoyment. Okay. Again, we're adults. Sometimes this mixes, but you get it. Next category is storytelling. So storytelling is going to wrap together anything from like literally sitting around the table with your buddies telling old stories. Totally counts. But this could also be reading a book, watching a movie, watching a show, anything like that where you are participating in the story. Going to the theater, that is a form of play. Oops. Another category is exploration. So if you like to travel or you like to try new restaurants, right? You like to go beer tasting, any of that where you are exploring something, that counts. That's a form of play. And then finally, passive attention. So this is something that we have actually lost a lot of. And passive attention is the form of play where we just kind of lose track of time. So this could be something like doing a puzzle. This could be video games, depending on how intricate they are, they could be passive attention. This could be staring out the window. It is the times when we're not asleep, but we're just letting our brain calm down a bit. We're not really paying close attention. It's actually really soothing to us to have some time in passive attention. But I'll let you guess where all of our passive attention time goes at this point. A lot of it is social media. So social media is designed to suck us into that vortex of passive attention. And it isn't inherently bad. But the problem with social media is in addition to passive attention, we're getting things like feeling competitive or like we're not good enough, like the other people posting their happy pictures. We may be feeling overwhelmed by the number of things we think we should do, right? There's all these different parts of social media. There might be nastiness in there, right? The comments on social media are not a happy place. So yes, you're getting your passive attention, but it's coming with doses of stuff that's not helpful. So that's my little note to maybe pull yourself away from the gram every now and then. Okay. Okay. These are my 4 categories. So any questions, Nick? Anything come in that it would be helpful for me to address?
I didn't see anything in the chat. I did appreciate how you kept layering them on. Like if you have something you enjoy doing in the play category, it also maybe you can't do it with people who are incongruent with you, or maybe it, aligns with the type. So I thought that was really interesting. Thanks for that.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. You can totally see how these all start. They're different, but they layer. So if you enjoy high sensory activity, your play is probably not a puzzle, right? That's not going to fit for you. Okay, anything else before I move on? So again, I said this before and I'm going to say it again because one of the things I find is, again, if that connection to ourself is really distant, you may not know, or this may have changed. So as I go into this next section where we talk about what to do about these things, if you feel overwhelmed by it, don't worry, just don't do that yet. Right now, what you're starting to do is you're starting to pay attention. If you're in a high sensory environment, how do you feel afterwards? If you're in a low sensory environment, how do you feel? Okay. Again, sometimes this takes time and we have to get to know ourselves. So please don't panic and feel like you don't know how to do it. It's just a matter of being kind of patient and kind as you figure it out. Also, if you're in a relationship with somebody, there is a good chance they are not the same on these. So if you're feeling tension in your relationship, sometimes it can be helpful to start getting curious about how is this showing up between the two of you, and then how do you need to bob and weave. I'll talk about that a little bit in my relationship in the next section. Okay. Okay. So we've got our categories. When it comes to our actual resilience routine, what I want you to start thinking about is these are the three different ways we can approach the categories. The first is we're going to minimize or maximize. The reality is we don't always have a lot of control, right? So it's not like I can just say, hey, sorry, accountant, taxes are very incongruent for me, so I'm going to skip them this year, right? That's not going to fly. A lot of things that are incongruent or outside of our preferences, they're not in our control. Some things, though, are in our control. Okay, so there are things that we can minimize or maximize when it comes to what is congruent for us. So an example for me is I'm in my office and you can probably see this overhead light isn't on. So being very low sensory, I'm very just impacted by light and noise and all those different things. So I don't, you probably can't see them as well, but I have a lot of lamps in here. I have a lot of different forms of lighting. That is a way of minimizing the sensory inputs in a way that is under my control. Okay. Same thing. My house has dimmer switches, candles. I don't exist in super bright environments if I can avoid it. If I can't avoid it, so let's say I'm doing a training and we're at like a conference center that has overhead fluorescent lighting. I can't ask them to turn the lights off, right? That's rude. So what I would then do is make sure that what I do, my like hotel room is lower lighting and I kind of let my central nervous system reset. Okay. Minimizing the things that tweak us out and then maximizing the things that bring us joy. So what I want you to do is think a little bit about what can you minimize? I'll give you another example. So sometimes this is uncomfortable to minimize it, but if you're burnt out and exhausted, we sometimes have to make the uncomfortable choices. So let's say that you have been on the same softball league with your college buddies for years, and it's something that you used to really enjoy, used to be highly congruent. But now it's just not, you kind of dread going, you're exhausted afterwards, it just doesn't fit. Okay, that may be the kind of situation where something has changed and minimizing incongruence means that next year you don't play. That's uncomfortable. You don't want to tell your buddies you don't want to play. But if we're talking about keeping you healthy and well, those are some of the choices we have to make. Likewise, if you are on a special team at work, right? Like let's say you join cold water rescue and you hate cold water. Okay, it is very incongruent for you to be in a wetsuit and in the water. Okay. There may be respect and honor that comes with being on a special team, but if it's super incongruent and you're not doing well, you may need to consider transitioning out of that at the appropriate time. Okay. Again, some changes we make are small, don't turn on the light. Other changes mean we have to make some hard decisions. Okay. And then likewise, we're going to maximize. So if I say high sensory and you're like, yes, okay, you need to be getting high input exercise. You need to be blasting music. You need to be having dance parties. Okay, we'll keep talking about the ways if we are noticing that we have a sensory or avert need and we're not meeting it, that's okay. We just have to maximize it where possible. Okay, I could go on forever with examples, but I'll move on to these other ones and then save time for questions. So the next section is structure, and I'm going to go back to this idea of daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, annually. That is one form of structure. So what in our four categories do you need on a daily basis? Okay, what do you need on a weekly or a monthly basis? And again, we're aiming for our best effort. There's stuff we need that we just simply can't always do, but when we try and we structure it in, that can make a big difference. So if you are super introverted and low sensory and you work in an environment where you are surrounded by noise and people, do you need some quiet time every day? Okay. Do you get that time? And this may be really, really hard. If you have a high stress job and then a house full of small children, getting time alone that's quiet can be really hard. But what I want you to start thinking about is it is essential to who you are and your central nervous system. Sometimes we judge ourselves when we meet our needs. So an example I have for this is I work with a lot of moms with little kids and they find themselves doing the whole hide in the bathroom thing, right? You go use the bathroom and then you just stay in there because you're alone and it's quiet. Okay. That's fine. If you're introverted and low sensory and you need time alone, there's nothing wrong with it. But what is that mom also probably doing on the back end? She's probably shaming herself, right? She's probably like, I am such a bad mom. I can't believe I'm hiding from my kids. That shame component is what I want to pull away. Because if you're introverted and low sensory, you're not being a bad mom. You're actually being a good mom by trying to recharge your battery. Okay. So in a situation like this with the client, I have done this with clients where we make a little hidey hole in the closet, right? A little spot with a blanket and a screen where you can watch reality crap TV, maybe a glass of wine, and they go hide for 10 minutes. Okay. Is it going to make everything better? No, but it is one little moment of kind of keeping close what is important to them as an individual. Another example is if you're high sensory and you find yourself on a bad day, like blasting death metal and like rage singing along with it. Sometimes we can be like, yeah, I'm losing my mind. I'm scream singing in the car. Maybe. But you're probably not losing your mind. You're probably just meeting your sensory needs. Okay, so loud music and loud singing, especially on an incongruent day, that may be part of your resilience routine and it is perfectly appropriate. Okay. Other pieces of structure to think about. So this is where we're just trying to be a bit more orderly. So some of it is scheduling. Some of it is taking something incongruent and approaching it differently. So if you have promoted, let's say you've promoted, one of the things that comes with promotion is a lot more admin work. And so let's say that you're now in charge of like time off requests or scheduling requests, and they come in all the time and they just, right? It's like rocks on a window, drives you nuts. Part of your resilience routine may be you do that first thing every morning. So 8 a.m. every morning or whatever your shift schedule looks like, you do the time off requests and then you do not do them again till the next day. Okay. For me, my admin, like I said, it's not very congruent for me. So I do it in the morning. And I try to be really structured with myself. 9 o'clock every morning, I am sitting and getting some of the boring stuff out of the way. That way it's not piling up and driving me crazy. Okay. That's an example of structure. Again, there's 8 million different ways we can approach this based on who you are and what you need. But hopefully this gets your wheels spinning a little bit. Okay. And then the final thing I want you to think about is counterbalancing. So sometimes we cannot minimize or structure something. And so that's where, especially paying attention to vert and sensory, we want to counterbalance. Okay, so an example of this may be I worked with a client once who worked in social services, and part of their role was they had to go to the jail. They had to go visit folks in the jail, and they hated that. It was very incongruent for them to go do those visits. So then what would happen is they put them off, and then they would pile up, and then they get even more incongruent because then it's a source of stress and tension within their leadership. Okay. So what we did is we took that and we integrated some structure. So you're going to try to go do your jail visits at least twice a week, Tuesday, Thursdays, or whatever it was, right? That is structure. We're going to try for twice a week. And then the counterbalance is you always go in the morning around 10 or 11, and afterwards you go get lunch at your favorite space. Okay. Is a great plate of pad thai going to fix a visit to the jail? No, it's not going to make it better, which is again why we're not aiming for happiness. But it is an element of kind of staying connected to yourself and what makes you feel good while you're doing the parts of your job that are incongruent. Okay. Another example, another client was dispatch on graves, right? So their life, their interaction, if we go back to big picture, their interaction with the community was at this point pretty limited to the phone calls that came in on graveyard shift, right? We all know what that looks like. So part of their resilience routine turned into going out into the community before going on shift, when it was light outside, when the parks were full of families playing on the slide versus whatever was happening at 3 in the morning, right? Visiting small businesses and remembering that the community is a bigger community than just what happens in the middle of the night. Okay. That was a part of that client's resilience routine and staying connected to themselves and the community around them. Okay. I can give you all kinds of examples of counterbalancing, but the most important part is you start to notice if a day is super incongruent, then we need to make sure we counterbalance that, okay, as best as we can. Again, it's not going to be perfect. We all have a lot going on, but as best as we can. Okay. Okay. Just keeping an eye on time here. So where do we go from here? Okay, we've got these 4 categories, right? We've got this idea of how we start to structure them. But if this feels super overwhelming, I want to make sure you know that I have some options for you. Okay, if you are super disconnected from yourself and what you need, and if I say things like we need to listen to our central nervous system and you're like, huh? That's okay, right? These are just skills. This training that I'm giving you right now, this is the 60-minute version of one that I also do in a 3-hour version. Okay. And in that 3-hour version, I'm just giving you more training. So I'm teaching you how to read your central nervous system. I'm teaching you how to address how you're doing. Because for some of us, we're so good at pushing through, we're so good at just getting the work done. When we're not doing well, we don't notice until it's way too far down the road. Okay. Those are skills. So if you are interested and that's something that could be helpful, this Mental Health 101 is an online course, 6 modules that are 30 minutes or less. And it's taking this material and then expanding it. It's 99 bucks. I try to keep it really affordable and 20% discount for anyone either on here live or listening to the recording. So the 20% discount is that code right there, PeerConnect20. Okay, so that's something, if this is something that you know you need more work on, that's a way to get a bit more assistance in the training. Something else I offer, again, my big goal is practical things to help you with the weight of the work. The next thing that I offer is called Burnout Boot Camp. So again, if I'm talking about this and you don't even know where to start, or you know that your relationship has a lot of different elements of this that need to be addressed, sometimes it's okay to pull in someone to help. So Burnout Bootcamp is kind of the next level up. So this is the 60-minute Mental Health 101 turns it into 3 hours. And then Burnout Bootcamp does those same components and adds on 3 coaching hours. Okay, so then I just sit with you and I walk you through all this and I help you figure it out. One of the things I'm really good at is helping you figure out what you need and then coming up with different ways for you to meet those needs. Okay, so if you feel alone and overwhelmed, you don't have to be. Okay. Finally, a couple other things I have available is I send an email out every week. My goal with that email list is just to be like a quiet reminder, like, hey, take care of yourself. I do some education in that. I ask some questions to help you plan. I try to keep that pretty brief, but also just really kind of helpful. Everything I can do to kind of remind you that it's okay to take care of yourself. So if you're interested, Kate's going to put all these links in the chat, and then you'll also get them in your follow-up email. All these will be linked and you can sign up. On that email list is also where you find out about my free trainings. So once a month, I do a free training on some topic. So 30-minute free training this month, February, is anger, technically the grumps, right? So when we work as a guardian, we tend to get grumpy, whether you identify it or your spouse is telling you you're grumpy. It is something that happens. So in this month's training, I kind of talk about what is that and what do we do about it. For those of you who are leading teams and supporting others, the free trainings are something that I hope is really helpful to you as a leader. So again, they're free, there's no investment, and all you have to do is forward an email to your team and you can give them some really practical support and education. So if you're a leader, that might be interesting. And let me think, what else was I supposed to say? This is my contact information. This goes directly to me, right? Shannon at Stack of Stones is my personal email, and this is my personal cell. I'm always really careful. I take your confidentiality very, very seriously, so everything is going to come straight to me and is kept secure. And I think that's it for my actual presentation. I tried to save a bunch of time for questions and then some time to see the new feature from Pure Connect. So, what questions does everyone have?
We can start with, we have a couple in the chat, and then if people think of some other ones or we want to shout them out after that, that'd be great. So we were asked, what if you cross the norms? For example, high sensory with extrovert, can it be mixed?
So I would normally see high sensory and extrovert actually as a mix, but what you may have meant is low sensory and extrovert.
That was Kevin, like maybe not being able to handle the
Yeah, like maybe you're
interaction.
drawn to high sensory events, but then you also want to be alone. That's why I split those out because they don't always naturally overlap. So this may be something like I'm just going to throw some stuff out and please
Mhm.
clarify if I'm missing this. You may want to be alone, but then you may play video games with headphones that are set really high. Okay, you may really want that high intensity input, even going as far as like getting the chairs that vibrate. Okay, those are sources of sensory input, but you may prefer to do that alone. And does that answer? Again, it's okay if we meet those needs separately. That's why I keep them as separate boxes. I can stop share now too, so I can see the chat.
Okay, and we have another
Everybody.
one. Does congruency have to be mental or emotional? Is there a physical aspect?
Totally, yeah, great question. Absolutely a physical aspect. And often they overlap. Okay, so here's an example. So I work with med students here at the local university. The first 2 years of medical school are classroom, so they are sitting. My students who are much more drawn to like emergency medicine or trauma surgery, they're not sitters. So physically, that can be really hard for them to sit in a chair all day long. And so from that standpoint, we're putting in some things to help them counterbalance the fact that they have to go to lecture. Yeah. And this could also be like weather, like if you hate being cold or you hate being hot, you hate being in a noisy environment, all of that totally counts.
Right.
Well, I didn't even take that part as what I was asking, but that's actually a solid point. It's something I find myself doing. But I was asking if so. My happy place was playing rugby, but
Okay.
now I'm 40. I've been on an ambulance for 20 years. Intramural rugby team is probably a bad idea.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Great question. This is something that comes up a lot. Unfortunately, our bodies don't always allow us to do the things that actually bring us joy. We're not going to be able to get the same level of sensory input and extroverted input that rugby may give. But if we're able to transition that over to even something like hitting golf balls. Okay, so the research shows anything with rhythm and impact can be really helpful. So if we can get out to the range and hit a bucket of balls, that gives us something. Again, it's not rugby, right? It's not, I have tons of clients who like that really high sensory impact. Sometimes we can't get there, but we're having to find a lower version of sensory. And then we give it everything we've got, right? You hit that golf ball with everything you've got. Great question.
Thank you.
What else?
How do I translate these topics to a younger crowd? I also teach a EMT class, and I'll
Mhm.
have a mix of adult learners and 18-year-olds that are first coming into the field. This level of emotional or like mental acuity is asking a lot from an 18-year-old.
Yeah. Honestly, when I'm training the newbies, right? They're so fresh. They don't even know yet. I view training this stuff as you're trying to set a foundation. So then if they're having a really hard time later, they've got that foundational information of, oh wait, I remember that part about sensory and I need to go back and do it. But sitting in the classroom, they often don't recognize they have the need because they're too fresh, right? They just don't quite, and they're in all honesty, they're often too arrogant, right? They're just young and brave. And so you're setting a foundation so that they can pick that up later. Hey, Regina, hold on. Work life. Yes, great question. Okay, so Regina asked if essentially if I summarize your question, things are always moving. So are we constantly adjusting? Yes, absolutely. Sometimes there's a baseline, and that's why I kind of start with basics. Like no matter what, there is some baseline we need. We have to sleep. But then it's going to adjust. So my resilience routine adjusts based on weather, right? So now it's cold and dark, so that requires different things. It adjusts based on season of life. Okay, so things like ages of your kids, or depending on the work you do, sometimes work is different. Your resilience routine might be different, fire season and non, right? It can adjust based on your role. Some of us have roles where we shift on a continual basis. Yes, the biggest thing we want when it comes to resilience routine is not like an Excel spreadsheet that is laminated and taped on the wall. That'll never work. It's more the ability to have, when I do the bigger training, I call it a pantry and recipes, right? So you have a pantry of items that you know serve your needs, and then you can mix them together in the recipes based on what you need that day. Great question. 12 grandkids. Yep, totally. Okay. One of the things I often recommend too, I was going to say this in structure, and I was just trying to make sure I used my time well. Sometimes we over aim. So for your resilience routine, aim high. So let's say that you love to camp, but you never camp because there's too many responsibilities and the kids have sports and blah, 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 and you don't train it. Structure may be you sit down and you plan 4 camping trips. you may know that the chance is two of those are going to get canceled. Okay. You aim too high, knowing that life comes, right? So if we're talking 7 kids and 12 grandkids, someone is always going to get sick. But if we aim high, if we plan more date nights or whatever it is that we need and things get canceled, we have a backup. Part of what I find is we put one thing on the calendar and then it gets interrupted and then we never start again. Okay. If you plan four and you get two, that's still two more than last year.
Mhm.
Awesome. What else? Or we can transfer over to Nick. I also, if you have questions that feel more personal or anything, just feel free to email them over. If you have questions about how to support your team, I know supporting teams can be really hard. Feel free to send anything you need, feel free to email. It's just Shannon@stackofstones.com.
That's actually, yeah, that's one thing I wanted to add maybe as a good segue is that if you, I know we have a lot of peer support coordinators, peer supporters, I think some chaplains in here. So this may definitely resonate with you. And I think for all of us, good categories to have, but you might be thriving right now, but still good to have in the back of your mind. But keep these in mind for as a resource for
Mhm.
your coworkers, partners, people you work with, because that's often where peer support comes in, right? Is that you don't have all the answers and you're not a clinician yourself, but having some of these topics and tools and then having Shannon's contact info to pass along as well would be great. So if you yeah, so we'll have all that for you. If you misplace it, we'll send the email out. If you are part of an agency that uses Peer Connect, then we'll make sure that this stuff is in there for your colleagues and coworkers and yourself to have quick reference to. I think that's important as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe we'll just quickly, because we're getting close to the end, we did want to show a couple new things. I'll just share my screen quickly here.
Can I
Um,
add a quick note to that too,
yeah, you
Nick,
bet.
while you get your screen set? So I also love training teams on this. One of the things I
Right.
find is that if you lead a peer support team, sometimes it's hard to start the conversation, right? If there's a critical incident and you show up and you're like, how's everyone doing? What are they all going to say? Fine, right? I'm okay. So when I do the longer version of this training, part of that is including language, giving everyone the ability to describe if they're struggling and then know what to do about it. So that's something to keep in mind. If you've been hitting that I'm fine wall, we can talk about how to help you through it.
Definitely, yeah. Yeah. So even having you come in and train the peer team or some coordinators and leaders, that'd be
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
Great. So yeah, just wanted to show really quickly for those of you familiar with Peer Connect, but maybe haven't looked at it in a little while, two kind of new features. One that's actually just coming out. The first one is what you're looking at now. So I'm on a laptop. Obviously, it looks a little bit different on a phone. But thanks to our friends, we have a lot of groups in Washington State that use Peer Connect, and what they wanted was a faster kind of access to request support from the peer team. So this is the dashboard that is new. So this is the first thing that pops up for anyone. Um, I'm in a demo user account. So because that person is a peer support, they have some extra options here that I'll talk about. So you can recommend, check in on people, or do an incident report. You can also request a connection from the peer or chaplain's team, depending on what your group has access to, right away, right off the bat. So that's kind of new if you haven't seen that. It defaults to the dashboard, so you have everything in place right away, and then you still have your news feed and the other, the library, the resources there. One of the new things we wanted to look at was recommendations. So if you are commanding officer or depends on your group, if you can recommend people for a check-in, you can do that right from the dashboard now. So I could recommend someone. And what we can do now is a batch recommendation. You see it still has the beta flag on it here. But if there is a critical incident or you know that there is a group of people at your agency that should be checked in on after a critical incident or something happens, you can batch recommend now. So just for a quick example, I could say I want these people to be recommended because they went to a critical incident. I can put the recommendation audience, sorry, went to a critical incident, and I can choose from the list of employees who we want to recommend. So we can say we want to recommend Angelica and Dave, and that is because they went to a critical incident. Now, your organization can choose If you want to also be able to add some notes there for the people that pick up that recommendation, the peer support team. And you can also, of course, postpone, because if they're still on scene, but you want them followed up with tomorrow, you don't want their phones ringing from a peer support saying, "Hey, I heard you went to this call. Are you doing? How you doing? How's your?" We'll go through Shannon's 4 stages there. So I could recommend them, tomorrow. Let's say, choose a time. Okay, that's good, and then submit that recommendation. So if you're not familiar with Peer Connect, what that's going to do, if I hit submit batch, that's actually going to notify people on the peer support team of this incident that these people need to be followed up with. However, when we're talking about congruency, like Shannon said, maybe there are people on the peer support team at your agency that you are not congruent with. So as a reminder, if you've never seen it before, with Peer Connect, you can actually customize or curate your individual peer support team. So for example, if all these people, let's say there's, 15 or so people on the peer support team at, my police department, my fire department that I work at, but we'll pick on Angelica here. Let's say I'm not congruent with Angelica. She just likes to talk about herself. Angelica's a great friend and colleague of ours, so we can pick on her here. If Angelica follows up with me or calls me, we just don't vibe. We're incongruent. I can remove her from my individual team. No one sees who's on anyone else's team. And this becomes kind of my secret filter that all of the connections always go through. So I'm only going to be responded to, if I reach out myself, if I'm recommended, if it's a proactive check-in. Let's say it's been a year and no one's talked to me or checked in on me. Your organization can set, annual check-ins. It is only going to notify the people that I've pre-approved, that I am, cool with, on the peer support team. And then one of them will commit to it and give me a call or go for coffee or whatever your agency's routine is. So yeah, just something we wanted to show. If your organization does not have this batch recommendation available yet, if you don't see it showing up there, just get a hold of your account manager, your Peer Connect account manager, and we can look at setting that up. Some of you probably have it available already, and you can start trying it out. It's working. It's ready to go. So, yeah, that is kind of what's new with Peer Connect. Again, if you have not seen the system, I think we have some links. Yeah, Kate just put a link, and that'll be in the follow-up package as well to get a full demo, and we'll kind of contextualize it to what your department has, or what programs, what processes you have in place, whether it's peer support, chaplaincy, a mix of both, clinicians on staff, large agency, small agency, lots of agencies working together. So we can go through that more one-on-one with you. All right. Chris, is this live in our Peer Connect currently? We would have to check. We can talk to your account manager and see. And do you offer testing to identify your types? That is for Shannon, I'm going to say.
Sure. Not necessarily testing. It's not like I can do like a personality. It's generally a lot more a conversation. And again, that allows us to wrap back in, kind of like you said, I used to love rugby and now I can't do it. The conversation is where I help identify. And if this was a live training, we would have been having a conversation this whole time. So,
Okay, last
Okay.
chance for some questions, although we don't have to run away. If you have time and want to ask some more questions, that's great. Okay, Shannon, do you want to put your slide up again with your contact and the promo code?
got it. Yep, here's my
For
information.
for that peer support product, do you have any type of sales package or anything that's put together to bring towards to management?
Yes, for sure. Your email, do you want to, if you're able to, or if we have your email, we can follow up.
If you just want to private message me, Kate
Mhm.
Lavoie, in the chat, I can make sure we send that to you.
Sure. I'm gonna send you my email now.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, any other questions for me? Again, feel free to reach out privately too if you have questions that you don't want to put out there publicly. Hello, everybody entering the waiting room. My guess is there is a time change problem. Welcome. Yeah. You'll get the full recording and an
You'll get the
email.
recording, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we will close things off. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. Thank you, Shannon. That was excellent. I learned a lot. I saw some messages and things, especially among our staff, really starting to think about some of this stuff. So thank you for that. And yeah,
Absolutely.
be sure to follow up with Shannon and with ourselves if you want to check out her training or Peer Connect, and definitely have some of these resources in your Peer Connect system if you have that already. So we will close things off. Thanks again, everyone. Look for that email follow-up package shortly, and stay tuned for our next webinar, which I don't know if we have a date on yet, Kate.
It will be in April. I will have the information soon, but it's with a gentleman by the name of Mark Junkerman. So
Great name.
Okay, we will see you all then. Stay safe, everyone. Have a great Tuesday.
Thank you, everyone.